Hey everybody, it's Stephen and Anthony. It is Tuesday when he and I get together and say hi, and we thought we would just make a little check in with everybody today to talk about the moving classroom. It occurs to us, or we know well, that not every school's traditions assume a room and a series of routines that we are describing in the Make It Music book. And because there's a possible transition there from the way things used to be to maybe the ways you might be exploring now, we thought it'd be helpful to talk about that a little bit. Anthony, you and I were just talking about when you first came to the school you're at now. You've been there, what, 17 years or 18 years at
Oh,
this?
in this particular assignment, I've only been here 12 years, but I've been teaching in public schools for 18 years now. So yeah, when I first came into this assignment, it was a more traditional classroom. I walked into my classroom and it was big tables everywhere, big filing cabinets full of music K8 back issues and every classroom instrument that you can imagine. They had an entire a crate full of triangles. I kind of thought that was weird because I was like, how many triangles do you need to play at once, really? I mean, at some point you think that's enough triangles. It was just dozens of triangles. And so that my first order of business was trying to reimagine the classroom and getting rid of furniture. And, I was very fortunate in this particular position when I first got this job that the superintendent was a former music teacher and was very supportive of my vision. And that was really helpful. I think politically, if you're in a situation where people didn't quite understand what you were trying to do, it might be a little bit more difficult, but it might take a little bit more politicking. But in my case, I had a lot of support from administration, which was really helpful. But yeah, we just purged the room of pretty much every stick of furniture and got him to get me one of those nice big music rugs to put in the middle of the room. And, and then one of the first policies that I implemented in my room, which really turned a lot of heads, was the shoes off policy, which is something in Dalcroze practice that we're quite familiar with. There's a lot of great reasons to do the shoes off that we've sort of been over, but it was definitely and continues to be one of the most memorable things that people take from my classroom when they come observe or from students who have been with me for a while. I just saw a high school student the other day who came up through my program and they were like, yeah, I remember we took our shoes off. That was like a big thing that it was a real memorable occasion. And that is something that, again, I had the political capital to pull off in my school, but, both Stephen and I really believe in that as a instructional strategy and sort of a policy that does give a lot of benefit. And I guess you have to decide in your particular situation if it's appropriate or not. It's not always appropriate, but if you can, it's worth a good deal of trouble to try to do it. But I guess everybody has to sort of make that calculation on their own.
Yeah, I taught right after middle school lunch in the cafetorium for years. When I was teaching at the high school, it was a building that was sixth through 12th grade, and there was a middle school cafeteria, and that was the room that I taught music and movement, that I was teaching eurythmics classes in, and I taught right after lunch. And so that room was disgusting. It
Oh,
always smelled bad, and it was always like, they had sort of mopped it, but it was always gross. So there was zero chance we were going to take our shoes off in that room. Like, just was not going to be a thing. But then I had other years where I was teaching in a different room, and I was able to make it happen. We want to make sure that we say you can do good work in all sorts of classrooms, in all sorts of physical spaces. If you're an itinerant teacher and you're sharing somebody else's room and it's full of the biggest desks imaginable, there's just no room for big body running around movement. It's not like you can't still do a lot of the techniques that we're describing in the Make It Music book. But when possible, there are some great benefits to trying to think about how do you set up the room. The clearing of space is like one of the things that I see all the time, I'm sure most all of you would get it as well, is that when you can simplify what everybody's looking at, then the things that is left for them to look at is you. The action that we're doing is the thing that's of interest, not all this clutter everywhere. And so
Mhm.
really minimalizing, simplifying the space, lets everybody direct their attention to actually the work that's going on, rather than all the toys or all the million posters with all the fluorescent lettering everywhere. Is one way that we can sort of create an ambiance, or create a sort of a visual space that everybody can be a little more calm in and pay attention. And then the deal with the shoes, just to not beat it too hard here, is that the biggest benefit, I really think, is that it just changes. It's like, oh, this is a weird room, or this is a special room, or this is a room where we do things in here that we don't do anywhere else. And so it's a kind of putting on the uniform. Only the uniform is taking off the shoe rather than putting on the special hat or the coat or something. And so when we are barefoot, Anthony does socks optional in his classroom. I'm working with older students. I can be meaner and more strict, and I have a lot more leeway. Wear shoes and socks off in my rooms. And as soon as you put on the uniform, then it kind of changes your mindset of, oh, this is the room we do these things, which is not to be confused with the gym class, for instance, where we're going to run like crazy with our sneakers on that grip really well and let me, sort of bang around. So the first, I think of it as a kind of putting on the mantle, we say, putting on the uniform. And then the second is that sort of the first tenet of any Dalcroze experience is that the body's the first instrument, and we want to play it with sensitivity. And when we can get rid of the shoes, all of a sudden everybody's motion changes. Nobody walks like they got shoes on when they don't have shoes on. It's a much more sensitive, a much more careful kind of playing of the first instrument. And
Mhm.
so for at least those first two answers, we're gung ho when possible. Again, I taught for years in the stinky cafetorium with all of our shoes on, and we were all just fine.
Yeah.
But I had to struggle in other ways that the shoes off would have fixed.
Yeah, I think another thing that the shoes off does is just kind of speaks to this idea of the moving classroom. Is it really makes movement a centered priority in your classroom. So if you're gonna, so for ours, it's shoes off every day. I mean, I suppose there's a universe in which you just take the shoes off on the days when you're going to do this kind of movement. But I think it's just best to just make the commitment to say, this is going to be a routine that we do, often enough and are committed to enough to take this step to do it. And it almost works for me as a teacher as a commitment to this style of movement. And if you if you make that commitment, then I think then you'll find that all these activities go better. It's like, this idea that you're just going to do it every once in a while. Well, I think that's fine, and we definitely welcome people to include it in their already existing curriculum. But the more you commit to it, I think the better results you'll get.
Yeah, when we say in the book, we say establishing the movement classroom, the movement-based classroom. And we really are trying to absolutely, just as Anthony said, we honor everybody who's got a current practice and it's working for you. And maybe it involves a lot of sitting in a chair, for instance, or whatever your classroom does. And that's fine. Of course, you're doing good work. We are not picking a fight with anybody. But there is a different threshold, which says, no, no, I'm changing the rules here. Instead of this being a more traditional classroom with desks and chairs and shoes and pencils and lots of paper, and we're going to sit and look forward, instead of that model for a classroom, we are very much encouraging you to at least consider or search out or research or ask questions about maybe there's a different model that could benefit you and your students. And maybe that would be something closer to what we're calling the moving classroom. In a moving classroom, the first idea is that, well, we're going to play our instruments. This is not a music appreciation class. It's a music making class. It's a music experiencing class. And so for all of our students, young or old, we're trying to help them fall in love with music, to understand how profound the musical act is. And the best way to do that, maybe I would argue the only way to do that, is to get it in the feeling body. So rather than talking about music and noticing music that is around me on the outside of my body or somewhere in this room or in the next classroom over, no, no, no. We're talking about the music that I feel inside of me. And the moving classroom that is a classroom that encourages the students to participate, like viscerally, actually, physically participate in their music making, jumps over so many hurdles right away. Like it's not some weird disembodied repertoire that has nothing to do with me. It is music that is me. I am making the music as the student in these classrooms. And so in order to get all that up front and center, we are creating a space where we, the teacher, are are uh, are forced to, are allowed to, are encouraged to. Yeah, let's get these games going. Let's get the motion going in the room. Let's make sure that 95% of what we're doing is the students actually participating in music, as
Mhm.
opposed to sitting back and listening and talking about music. And so all the games in the book are all versions
Mhm.
of doing that.
Yeah, I think you said something there that reminded me, is I really everywhere that I teach, I one of my first procedural things to consider is how the students are going to walk into the room. And almost, I think in almost every situation that I teach in across the board, I do not allow the students to walk into the room until we are ready to begin the experience, right? And when we walk into the room, that act is the initiation of this experience. It is the introduction, it is the exposition of our piece we're about to create. And so I always, I think I remember earlier in my career, that moment when all the children are in the room and they're sort of playing and talking amongst themselves and like, and then the moment where the teacher has to go, okay, everybody pay attention, and sort of like, I just feel like that starts for me, it starts the lesson off in this chaotic way that I don't prefer. So for me, that initiation of walking into the room is done with intention and is done with a almost an expressive quality. So when we walk into the room, it's beginning right there, and there's not a sort of a loose dead time. And that's like one of the first like moving classroom things is like the space is used for that. The space is a character in this whole thing. The space is a part of our ensemble. And we're not going to just come in and scribble on it. When we walk in, we are filling the space with music. And then when class is over, we leave. And there's not like free time in the space. I think that's for me, was a really effective strategy to start and something you might experiment with.
And if you can get a chance, Anthony, I don't know if you would have a clip of that on your Music XT or
I
not,
do,
because
yeah, sure.
it's sort of like almost we take it for granted that like, oh, we're not actually teaching yet. It's just the beginning of the class. But if you watch the way Anthony works those rooms, right from the beginning, the way he's at the door, he's talking to them in the hallway, he's welcoming them in. It's not rigid in any way. He's chatting with students as they're messing with their shoes and encouraging them to put their shoe here, not there, and then the students are aware of what their routine is. I'm taking off my shoes. I'm coming to the middle of the room. Or I don't know, actually, maybe you wait. Isn't your normal thing they take off their shoes and they kind of are all together there and then you invite them
We
all to the
all
room?
go to the middle of the room together. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's in Carnegie Mellon, that was what I did. But then in my public school, it's slightly different. So every space you come into, you sort of have to I spend a good 15, half an hour just kind of walking through it myself. In this space, how does it feel? The proximity of the door, where are we doing the shoes? Where are they going to wait? What are the logistics? You sort of have to like envision it. And then, so when you hit it, it's got an intention. You can't just sort of, let it just be whatever it is. It has to me. It's got to have a little bit of thought to how are we actually going to execute the beginning of this class.
I love the care of that. And we talk in the book about pacing and we talk in the book about transitions, both of which are critical master teacher skills. If when I observe a classroom that's just not quite holding together, things are getting a little wild, it's almost always either a mixture of pacing or the way you were trying to transition from that to this and being able to finesse those. So that initial transition from I'm not in the music class until I'm entering the music class is a critical one. And then what the students are experiencing as they come in through that transition is, oh, I'm entering into a special space where we do different things. And there are new rules in this room that don't apply in other places in this school. like no one else makes us take our shoes off. No one else makes us sit on the floor in the way that we're sitting on the floor, or maybe, whatever the things are. No one is going to invite us into these sorts of games except in this special room. And then it's about keeping that pacing going. Um, I don't know, Anthony, I don't know how much we want to talk about today with this. I think, I feel like in my mind, as soon as I start the next thing, I've got another 45
Yeah,
minutes.
we should just, yeah, we should write another book. But what I wanted to say though, that I think would be important to kind of put a pin on it is that, so our card decks actually have a consideration for this moving classroom. And I think it's worth sort of reminding people that if you look at the starter cards, at the bottom of the cards, there's a little meter you can see there, right? And it's got a number and a color denomination on it, if you see that. What we're saying here is not, it's not difficulty necessarily, right? None of these starter cards should be terribly difficult. But what it does is it gives you an indication of how much sort of familiarity your students might need to have with the paradigm of a moving classroom, moving through space, interacting with each other, being a little bit free and on their own path. What does that look like? And in a classroom that's not set up for it and isn't that familiar with it, you might struggle with a level 4 activity. Like for instance, here's a level 4 activity. It says walk then reverse, walk through space to a steady beat, on command walk backwards. Well, that's actually not hard to do at all, but it is hard to do for maybe a group of second graders who are used to just being in chairs. They're going to have all kinds of trouble bumping into each other, bumping into furniture, not, walking backwards through space. If they're not familiar with, these kind of activities, we recommend that you maybe skip that if that's not something you've ever done or can imagine going well. But conversely, you might have a level 1 activity, something like this: body circles, standing in space, draw circles with various parts of the body. Hey, you know what? That's a level 1. You can do that in just about any space. If you're a push-in teacher who walks into a classroom with a cart, you could easily have the students stand up behind their desk and do that activity, and it would be a breeze. So this established moving classroom idea, we welcome all teachers who have a variety of familiarity with these ideas or ability, necessarily logistical ability to set things up. It's not your fault necessarily that your school's got you on a cart, but you can make these sort of judgments to yourself. A level 4 activity might be one that would be difficult to pull off in that setting.
In the book, we take a little bit of time to tell you a descriptor for these 4 markers at the bottom of the starter cards. We think of level 1 as activities that are mostly performed in place. They don't really require a lot of moving around at all. So if these are things you can just do. You could do it in a chair, you could do it sitting still, you could do it standing in place. The level 2 ones are performed in place, but often involve partner work or clapping gestures. So there's a little bit more physicality, even though you're still not traveling. The level 3s assume some amount of traveling, but there's lots of opportunities in a level 3 for redirection. And so they're a good set of routines as we're starting to welcome the students into exploring more space in the room. So there's lots of start and stop opportunities in those. A level 3 or a kind of an exercise that would get you to learn about moving in the space would have you go away, but then come back. So they often would start with a home base or have your place in the room that you would be on, go away, come back to it. And then the level 4s are the ones that, no, you can just go anywhere you want within the obvious places in this room, and we've helped you. We've built routines that help you know how to sort of keep your hands to yourself when the music stops. And with my students, we say when the music stops, you put your second foot on the floor, turn and face me. And so it's as simple as that. As I'm starting to build students closer to a kind of level 4 moving classroom mentality, we've gone through some level 3 type exercises where we go away when we come back, and then as we take some comfort with that, we go away and pause wherever we are. And whenever we do that pause in space, the music has stopped, then you realize, oh, I was walking, so my back is to the teacher. That student now is starting to learn, put their second foot on the floor so they're not teetering around trying to balance on one foot, and then turn and stare at me. Turn and see me, the teacher. And now we can you can get your next cue to know what's going on next. And students who can do that kind of attending are much more ready for that level 4.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that also the way we considered it too is that if you're doing level ones and level twos, at a certain point you'll be ready for level threes. It'll actually help you to build that moving classroom routine if you just do the activities. You don't have to do anything different, just kind of keep on doing the activities. The exception being sometimes there's just logistical problems with the amount of space you have, and that does take a little bit of consideration. And frankly, sometimes it can't be avoided, and that's the way it is. If you're teaching in the middle school cafetorium after lunch, there's not a lot is in your power in terms of how sticky the floor is. So that's totally up to you. Yes, I think
when I
that's
was in
good.
that cafetorium at this particular school, they had vending machines in that room as well. They had these like, you could put your
Mhm.
$2 in and get, some processed food out of it. And they were super noisy. And I was so angry about it because I'm like, it's not like it's not bad enough that I'm just in this dumb room with the sticky floor, but I got to deal with this noisy. And then, no, the worst part, it wasn't just that they hummed and were noisy. The worst part was I was in a high school. And so random kids from the whole building would get a hall pass out of whatever math class they were in. They'd come down to the cafetorium and walk through my classroom to get their goofy bottle of soda or whatever out of it. Everything was wrong about the situation. The whole thing was just terrible. And
I'm sure you were very pleasant to
I
those.
was so upset, and for the first while, I would just holler at these students, and they'd look at me like I was stupid because I'm not their teacher.
Right.
They're like, "You don't know me. You don't have any power over me. You don't even know my name. I'm gonna walk away. You can't even find me in this big school." So I was like, I was at my wit's end, and then I finally got smart, and I just made myself an out of order sign. So every day that I taught the class, I put an out of order sign on it, and I unplugged the
Smart.
I unplugged the vending machine so they didn't hum. And the students would come in all like aloof and whatever. I don't even care that you're trying to teach. I'm just going to walk right through the middle of your class. But then they'd see the sign and they'd give the sign a side eye, like, ugh, it's out of order. And then they'd just walk away. And I was like, I figured it out. I win. And so
That was a win.
that's
That
how it
was
works.
genius.
Genius. Brilliant. Brilliant.
All right. Well, I think that's enough, on this subject for this particular conversation. But I can definitely encourage people to check out these chapters in the book, and leaf through the card decks, and you can find all your own way forward through this idea of setting up a moving classroom, to fits your situation and your students.
There's not just one way. So invent your way, send us some notes that let us know how you are solving the riddle. We will be thrilled to talk with you and to get more examples of what moving classroom would mean in your school. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you maybe in a week.